Hello, everyone. Welcome back to today's story. In this episode, Jack and Tu Tien take a decisive step toward their future. Not a wedding yet, but something just as meaningful: their official engagement. This is the moment their relationship is no longer private, but openly witnessed by family, neighbors, and the entire community. As the crowd gathers, the trays are presented, and elders speak their words. Jack and Tu Tien come to understand that engagement is not only about love, but about standing together under public scrutiny. Stay until the end to see how this engagement reshapes their relationship and sets the foundation for everything that comes next. And don't forget to subscribe to help us reach 10,000 subscribers. Your support truly means the world to us. The kitchen is quiet after dinner, the kind of quiet that only comes when the day has finally loosened its grip. The stove is still warm, radiating a gentle heat that lingers in the air. Jack leans against the counter, sleeves rolled up, watching Tu Tien rinse the bowls and stack them neatly by the sink. There's no rush tonight, no deadlines, no phone calls, no unexpected visitors. Just the two of them, sharing that calm moment that always comes after a long day. Tu Tien glances at the bag of peanuts sitting on the table and smiles. "We still have these," she says casually, but her eyes brighten with a familiar spark. Jack knows that look. It's the same look she gets whenever she thinks about making something with her own hands. "Peanut candy?" he asks. She nods. "We haven't done it in a while. And we have time." Jack laughs softly. "All right, but you're in charge. I'm just the assistant." They move around the kitchen together, almost automatically. The peanuts go into the pan, slowly roasting, filling the space with a warm, nutty aroma. Tu Tien slices fresh ginger, the sharp scent cutting through the sweetness already forming in the air. She pours sugar into the pot, adds water, and turns on the heat, watching closely as it begins to melt. "This part always makes me nervous," she admits, stirring carefully. "If the sugar goes wrong, everything goes wrong." Jack steps closer, peering into the pot. "It looks fine. Just don't stop stirring." I know," she says, but she moves aside to let him help. Their hands brush briefly as he takes the spoon, and they both pause for half a second longer than necessary. It's such a small thing, but it sends a quiet flutter through both of them. The sugar starts to bubble, clear at first, then slowly thickening. Tu Tien watches closely, her brows knitting together in concentration. "Not yet," she murmurs, when Jack reaches for the peanuts. "Just a little more." Minutes pass. The bubbles grow larger, heavier. The color deepens slightly. Finally, she nods. "Now." Jack pours the peanuts into the pot, and the mixture hisses loudly, steam rising in a fragrant cloud of ginger and sugar. Tu Tien sprinkles in sesame seeds, stirring quickly as the mixture thickens almost instantly. "Wow, this batch is serious," Jack says, his arms starting to feel the strain. "Don't stop," Tu Tien says quickly, laughing. "If it hardens in the pot, we're done for." They work together, switching hands, laughing when the spoon nearly sticks in place. Once it's ready, they spread the mixture onto a metal tray, smoothing it out as best they can. It's not perfect. The surface is uneven, a little too thick in some places, thinner in others. Tu Tien sighs. "It's not going to look nice." Jack shrugs. "As long as it tastes good." They stand there for a moment, looking at their creation as it slowly cools. The kitchen smells incredible, and the fatigue from the day seems to fade, replaced by a quiet excitement. While waiting for the candy to harden, they clean up together. Jack washes the pots, while Tu Tien wipes the counters. It's routine, but comfortable. When they're done, Tu Tien stretches and checks the time. "It's late," she says. "We should shower and rest." Jack nods. Tomorrow's going to be busy. But neither of them moves right away. There's something unspoken hanging in the air. A feeling that tonight is different, even if nothing obvious has changed. When the candy is finally cool enough, Tu Tien carefully breaks off a small piece. She hesitates before tasting it, as if bracing herself. "Well?" Jack asks. Her face lights up. "It's good, really good." Jack grins and takes a piece himself. The candy is a bit soft, not as crisp as it should be, but the flavor is rich and warm. "You're right, it's perfect." "Not perfect," she says, smiling despite herself, "but good enough." They laugh, sharing the rest of the tray between them. Outside, the night air is cool, a stark contrast to the heat of the sugar earlier. Tu Tien leans against the counter, watching Jack, her thoughts drifting. Later, as they get ready for bed, she feels a strange mix of calm and anticipation. The candy, soft and imperfect, reminds her of something else, something still forming, still not fully set, but real. The next morning, a light rain taps against the windows. Tu Tien wakes early, the house quiet except for the distant sound of water dripping from the eaves. She slips out of bed and goes to the kitchen, where the tray of peanut candy sits on the table. She tries cutting it into neat pieces, but the knife sinks in too easily, pulling the candy out of shape. She sighs in frustration. "I knew it," she mutters to herself. "Too soft." She considers for a moment, then shakes her head. "Fine, we'll keep it for home." When Jack comes in, rubbing his eyes, she tells him about it. "I don't think we can give this to anyone. It's not presentable." Jack takes a piece and chews thoughtfully. It still tastes amazing. That's what matters. She smiles, but a small sense of disappointment lingers. Just then, the rain picks up, heavier now, drumming against the roof. "Well, there goes the plan to go out early," Jack says. Tu Tien glances out at the garden. "We still need to fix the fence. The puppies keep getting in." She starts talking about using bamboo, something simple and quick. Jack listens, nodding, then shakes his head. "If we're going to do it, let's do it properly. Wood will last longer." She looks at him in surprise. "But the rain." "I'll go now," he says without hesitation, already reaching for his jacket. Her heart warms at his decisiveness. "Be careful," she says softly. As Jack heads out into the rain, Tu Tien stays behind, cleaning up the kitchen. Her earlier disappointment fades, replaced by a steady sense of reassurance. Even when plans don't work out, even when things aren't perfect, she's not handling it alone anymore. Outside, the weather is unpredictable, but inside, something feels solid, like a fence being built, not just around the garden, but around the life they're quietly shaping together. When the last motorcycle disappears at the bend of the road and the dust finally settles, the house enters a strange in-between state, no longer crowded, but not yet quiet. The engagement has ended officially, but its weight continues to press gently on everyone who remains. Chairs are still scattered across the yard. A few cups of tea sit untouched, and the faint scent of incense clings stubbornly to the air, refusing to leave. Jack and Tu Tien stay seated inside, side by side, not speaking at first. It's not exhaustion that keeps them silent. It's awareness. Awareness that from this moment on, nothing about their relationship exists only between the two of them anymore. Tu Tien rests her hands on her lap. The ring feels heavier than she expected, not physically, but symbolically. Every time she shifts, the metal catches the light, pulling her attention back to it. Jack notices. "You keep looking at it," he says quietly. Tu Tien lets out a slow breath. "Because it keeps reminding me, today wasn't just for us." He nods. It never was. Around them, both families remain. The atmosphere has shifted from ceremonial to instructional. This is the phase the elders value most. The part no one photographs, no one applauds, but everyone remembers. Tu Tien's father speaks again, his voice steady but firm. An engagement changes how people judge your actions. Small mistakes feel bigger. Careless words spread faster. Jack listens intently. "I'll be careful." "Careful isn't enough," her father replies. "You must be intentional." Tu Tien's mother looks at her daughter. "And you," she says gently, "must remember that compromise doesn't mean silence. Engagement gives you the right to speak, not the duty to endure." Tu Tien nods slowly. "I understand." Jack's mother adds, "From today on, there should be no secrets that affect both of you. Privacy is fine. Secrecy is not." Uncle Dung leans back slightly. "And if conflict comes, and it will, you don't let it grow roots." The conversation continues like this for a long time. It isn't emotional, but it is intense. They discuss boundaries with relatives, financial transparency, public behavior, and expectations once the engagement is known everywhere. Every sentence reinforces the same truth. Engagement is not romance. It is responsibility, witnessed and remembered. As the light outside softens, Jack and Tu Tien finally step away. They walk into the yard together. The canopy has been partially dismantled, ropes hanging loosely. Footprints are stamped into the soil, overlapping in chaotic patterns. Evidence of how many people stood here just hours ago. The sky is tinged with orange and pale purple, signaling the slow arrival of evening. Tu Tien sits on the stone steps, rubbing her hands together absent-mindedly. "I didn't realize how much pressure comes after everyone leaves." Jack sits beside her. "That's because during the ceremony, you don't have time to think." She turns to him. "Do you feel like something ended today?" Jack thinks for a moment. "Yes." The option to be unclear. She lets out a quiet laugh. "That's exactly it." They sit there in silence, watching the sky darken. No romantic gestures, no dramatic words, just shared understanding. Inside, relatives begin organizing the remains of the day. Engagement trays are carefully rewrapped, symbolic gifts checked and recorded according to tradition. Leftover food is divided neatly, some for Jack's family, some for Tu Tien's. Nothing is rushed, nothing careless. Engagement, even after the ceremony, follows order. A neighbor returns briefly to pick up a forgotten helmet. She pauses, looking at Jack and Tu Tien. "You two didn't joke around today. she says. That's good. It shows seriousness. Tu Tien bows her head slightly. Thank you. As night settles in, only close family remains. The house feels smaller now, but heavier with meaning. Jack's mother calls them back inside. Before today ends, she says, there's something you should do. She places a small tray on the table, tea prepared simply, without ceremony. Sit together, she instructs. Drink this tea as an engaged couple. It's a quiet gesture, but intentional. Jack pours the tea. His hands are steady. Tu Tien accepts the cup with both hands, as she was taught. They drink slowly, without speaking. No one interrupts. This, Jack's mother says afterward, is how you start learning to move as one. Later that night, fatigue finally takes over. Tu Tien changes into comfortable clothes and returns to the main room. Jack is sitting alone, staring at the empty space where people gathered earlier. Still thinking? She asks. He nods. I keep remembering the silence before you answered. She sits beside him. That silence felt heavier than all the noise. But you didn't hesitate, he says. She looks at him. Because I didn't want to. Before going to bed, Tu Tien removes the ring briefly. She cleans it carefully with a cloth, then places it back on her finger. The motion is slow, deliberate, almost ritualistic. Jack notices. You don't have to do that. I know, she replies, but I want to treat it with respect. This isn't decoration. The night passes quietly. The next morning, life resumes, but not as before. Jack wakes early and steps outside. The yard looks ordinary again. No canopy, no trays, no crowd. Only faint marks in the soil remain, slowly disappearing under the morning light. Tu Tien joins him, wrapping a light jacket around herself. People will start talking today. Jack smiles faintly. They already are. She nods. Questions, advice, expectations. He looks at her. Are you ready for that? Yes, she says without hesitation. Because we chose it openly. They begin discussing practical matters. Return visits to relatives, acknowledging elders, how to respond when people ask about wedding dates. None of it feels romantic, but all of it feels necessary. Later that day, Jack accompanies Tu Tien to visit a nearby relative who couldn't attend the ceremony. The visit is brief, respectful. Gifts are exchanged. Congratulations are offered. Each interaction reinforces the same message. Their engagement is now part of the community's memory. On the way home, Tu Tien speaks quietly. Everywhere we go now, people look at us differently. Jack responds calmly. That's because we allowed them to. She nods. I don't regret it. Neither does he. As days pass, the engagement settles into routine. Not excitement. Routine. Conversations shift. Decisions are made together more often. When Jack speaks about plans, he says we without thinking. When Tu Tien considers the future, she no longer calculates alone. One evening, she stops suddenly while organizing papers. Do you realize, she says, that we're already acting differently? Jack looks up. How so? We think before speaking. We explain things more clearly. We argue less carelessly. He smiles. That's engagement working. She returns the smile. Then it's doing its job. Jack and Tu Tien don't celebrate their engagement with trips or parties afterward. They don't need to. The real engagement continues quietly, in responsibility, in visibility, in accountability. They stood before everyone. They accepted expectation. They removed ambiguity. And from that moment on, their relationship is no longer defined by emotion alone. It is defined by commitment, structure, and the shared decision to move forward, together and in the open.